All right, I thought I would discuss the solution to Zach Polanski's posited problem that everyone's running faster and faster just to keep in the same position. The Red Queen problem. Sargon said the right needs to have an answer, and I do have an answer. I've only watched 3 minutes and 41 seconds of his video on that. And instantly it's just like, okay, yeah, here's the solution. Basically, you know how people complain that taxes go to on gasoline and income and property and so on? So it squeezes the people with jobs who work. But also, you notice how making things is not as profitable as shuffling money around, like big banks and stuff like that. So it's a meta percentage versus a flat real productivity. Basically, if you like, I'll give a metaphor here for Dungeons and Dragons. Basically, where like if you have a dagger that does 1 to 5 damage, and you add 20% damage, or you have like a halberd that does 10 to 70 damage, and you add 10% damage. Which one's higher, right? Obviously, you want the one with higher baseline with half the meta percentage increase. Because that's about, that's about 1 to 7 damage extra. And the dagger is only like, I mean, if you round it up automatically by default, it's like 1 to 1 or 2 extra damage. Actually, no, it's 1 to 1 extra damage. So you're looking at like 2 to 6 damage for the dagger and 11 to 77 damage for the halberd. When all the baseline and the meta percentage increases are intact or put into place. And basically, manufacturing and resources are baselines. Distributors talked about this with his Cowboys versus financiers talk in his Cowboys Fiddler Green podcast. The Cowboys are people that provide a service or product, like digging for resources or making something out of those resources that people can readily use for extra money. Basically taking a lump of, like, if you take a stick or a log or something, right, and a knife, you can sell it as a stick or a log and a knife, or you could carve something out of it and sell it for way more just by applying time and effort to the log with the knife. And there's a global economy of people doing this. And shipping manufacturing to China prevents this value-added method of resource generation manufacturing from resources. And one of the answers initially is yes, you can use tariffs on supplies to artificially, sort of, in a sense, prioritize manufacturing being at home instead of abroad. And the slave labor problem of cheapness, where slave labor basically and bad wages take the brunt of the make the brunt of savings for the customer, let's say, for cheaper products to outcompete the more expensive but more ethically wage earner paying manufacturers um, gets directly um, nullified the advantage of the slave labor if you target countries that use sweatshops directly. You can use it broadly, or you can use it directly. Um, you could have it on like China only, or you could have it on China and India and Africa, or something like that. Or you could do a combination of various countries and so on. But I'm giving a broad example here, so that the cheap labor stuff doesn't outcompete your homemade stuff. And basically, what you do is you do a combination of tariffs initially on sweatshop producing countries, and you do lighter tariffs on honest work, but way cheaper because they're poorer in general countries. So you did the heavy tariffs on the sweatshop companies and the lighter tariffs on the poor producing countries, so to even the odds with your own homemade stuff. And that's the first step. The next step is to start getting rid of regulations for the most part. Nick Freitas talked about fiat currency and how this ties directly into sabotaging manufacturing. And the need for a commodity or stuff backed, like oil, gold, food, memory sticks, backed money, where you can go straight to the source for that country and give their own dollars and get a set amount of whatever the commodity is. The most common one is gold. But I guess Taiwan could technically do microchips, and Saudi Arabia could do oil. That's what OPEC is, and that's why Saudi Arabia is making money hand over fist. Because they're selling something that people use naturally, and you get rid of regulation for the most part. You keep a couple common sense things. You slash the strangling effects of socialism on business, and just naturally, competition will emerge as people get into the markets because they see a potential opportunity naturally as an emergent property of the market. I was just listening to my neighbor talk about how there was a town in Mexico that didn't have a gas station, but there was like a gas station 250 miles north and 250 miles south. And some bright guy got the idea, let's save up our community's money and make a gas station. And they did, and they made money hand over fist. So they bought some satellite dishes. And then the second year they bought a hospital, or made a hospital. And then the fourth year they made a liquor store, and then the fifth year they made like 4 hooker houses, brothels, and then they just rake in the money, and they've got their businesses that make them money, and they just coast. They got what they needed. They just need a little bit of money. But you notice how the source of this wealth is in just people naturally coming together to solve a problem. How do we get gas? How do we get healthcare? And how do we get liquor? Right? When nothing's built here, except for a whorehouse, a brothel. And then because it became a flourishing center, 3 out of the 4 brothels that exist popped up afterwards. And the satellite dishes are just for an investment towards entertainment in the middle of nowhere, right? So they had an initial sort of like, oh, hey, party effect, but then they invested a little bit more. Really simple stuff, and the thing is, there's not a lot of red tape, so it wasn't hard to do. They could technically have it. A bad hospital is better than no hospital, in the very strictest sense. One gas station is better than no gas station. A liquor store is better than no liquor store for the most part. And this is just people learning there's an opportunity in the market and applying, oh, I could make money if I fulfill that need. So I'm going to fulfill that need. It's not planned out meticulously by God Emperor level Primarchs on every facet of the economy. It's literally just a situational sort of my situation assessment and so on. And it's a raging success story. Now, yes, there was a communal element to it, but the community owns it because the community scratched together the money and said, we're going to borrow money to invest in owning this thing. One person who's a private citizen could also do the same thing, and that's a small business. And if the population grows, then they could always have people who are private individuals or their community put up the scratch to add the same things that I mentioned already of what they built, except more of them. More stores of the same type, or some extra stores like a coffee shop or something like that. Sargon is a good example of someone who did exactly this with the Lotus Eaters, and his personal life entrepreneurial element is absolutely the story of someone that saw a need for something and then provided it and benefited financially off of it. He should know the exact mechanism I'm talking about, basically, and how it actually plays out in some of the details sometimes and so on. Competition keeps businesses honest for the most part. The thing I would watch for is there's a reasonably good small business that's like family owned in my neighborhood that I go to regularly, and a no-frills opened up. Now, no-frills is cheaper, but I go to the family business more often than not because I support the family business even while I'm on welfare, and the extra money could actually go a long ways. But the reason why No Frills is cheaper is because they hire foreign workers that take in foreign workers who get government subsidies to pay their wages for the government, for the business, at like 30 or 70% or something. So that's why it's cheaper. The family business is naturally cheaper than the big grocery store that's a little further away, so there's actually 3 stores. And for the longest time, the big grocery store, the third one I mentioned, had a monopoly more or less on the region for a lot of food, and No Frills is offering competition for it. But the family business is the one I've been going to for the longest time because they are just plain honest business people. Their store is a little less busy now that the No Frills has opened up, and it's actually pretty close to the family business. So, you know, but however, so it's not a totally qualified success of the free market exactly, because No Frills is technically benefiting from government subsidies to make it affordable for my welfare ass. But when I can go to the family business store, I go there out of loyalty to the people who run it. And that's going to be my personal stance on my approaches to business and being a consumer or customer and so on for as long as I can do it. Now, regulation, taxation, taken from taxpayers who are working to give to people who are not working automatically creates inefficiencies in the economy. And I don't mean useless inefficiencies. Or so I do mean useless inefficiencies in a way. By default, if you're paying people not to work, they won't work and they won't provide services or products to the rest of their people. And no offense, but the Greens have a point in one sense, but it's not really a good point, which is we basically plunder the earth to survive. But I made a video earlier that mentioned nothing living exists by not consuming the external environment somehow. We have to consume, devour the riches of the earth just to survive. It's a fundamental fact of every living being there is. Whether it was the first RNA strands in evolution or it's the human beings we have now. You know, the green stuff that clamps on jobs, the socialism, regulation, taxation that clamps on jobs and efficiency of transfer of wealth from customer to provider. Within our own countries specifically, does so based on the Malthusian catastrophe concept. And the reality is that the Greens want to kill us off, basically. We are the carbon they want to reduce. So you just plug that in, and you got your answers, right? They're making it less efficient in plundering the earth for many people's well-being from our own people, for our own people, I should say, from the earth. And effective natural selection redistribution. I mean, basically, I said Mother Nature's a cruel mistress, but eugenics is harsher. And socialism is the eugenics of natural selection in the economy. Competition is natural selection. State planning is eugenics. To link the economic market and genetic selection terms. Free markets are the natural selection, and socialism or greenism, actually no, I'll mention greenism in a second. Socialism is the eugenics, and green is the suicide cult, basically. The Jim Jones cult, to link it back to markets and genetic survival. And the logic flows from all of that. All you have to do is get off the necks of the people that want to be entrepreneurs and small business owners and so on, and provide a stable, safe community where the criminals are policed and there's not a lot of foreigners invading and unnecessarily causing the problems of overpopulation and straining the developed infrastructure massively. And it'll basically, as an emergent property, it will just naturally solve itself eventually. You know, and inflation will go down. But, you know, I mean, the more we've gotten closer to state socialism or anarchism or communism or greenism or neoliberalism or palace economies, you know, it's all basically related. The free market is the free market. Everything else is fundamentally dysfunctional. That's what it comes down to. And I'm not saying you can't have a basic welfare state necessarily. I mean, I'm relying on it myself, so I'm loyal to it in a sense because I realize I actually need it for now. And I don't want to remove the safety net for people at the most basic level. But back in the day when taxes were like 20% and like the economy was booming because they didn't have a lot of regulations and stuff, and they weren't sabotaging the economy for greenism and stuff, my welfare disability paid like more than double what rent costs. And now I get about enough money to cover rent with like 5 to 10% money total paid to me left over. Right? That's why I live in a slum at half rent. So we're talking like a 60% drop in income through the greenification and socialismification and so on, and the higher and higher taxes and the squeezing and the putting more people on disability and auditing them to get the fakers off of it and so on. And the subsidies for foreign workers so they can take the money from our taxpayers and give it to their families in a different country. Now, all of that, I mean, fundamentally, I've lived it. I've lived the wannabe God Emperorification of the total system. And Maxwell's demon is why Roko's basilisk will never work. Roko's basilisk is an inherently socialistic concept. In a sense, it's a fear of socialism from a robot, an AI. And the truth is that and the truth is a smaller system cannot fully control a greater system. And they cannot fully control their own system that they are the totality of. There's a mysterious interplay between systems, and the march of time with a general, not everyone survives, but most do, kind of increase through evolution of our capacities to live on and have children and carry on the legacy and so on. And you notice this by lower life forms having what's a mosquito have, 100 eggs, and 99 of them die? And then humans have 3 kids and maybe 1 dies. Yeah. You know what I mean? And you can see that in our families when we had 14 kids before. You can see that when we were less technologically advanced, where we'd have 14 kids, but due to medical problems, 4 would die off before the age of 5. Right? And another thing to mention is we put so much money into healthcare, and what it's turning out in British Columbia is that 60% of the healthcare is actually paying managers, or 40% of the population of people in healthcare are managers, which is crazy. So the regulation thing is really strangling the healthcare. And we literally put half our money in healthcare in BC. Actually, literally. I looked up how much we pay in healthcare and how much our income is and how much we borrow every year and so on. And it's literally half our income. And our healthcare is kind of crappy in most cases. So, a dual movement of shredding the unnecessary bureaucracy and managerial, too many cooks in the kitchen, too many generals, not enough privates in the army, kind of style problems. And maybe also making a focus on the really basic healthcare, not the advanced treatments for random niche diseases as much. I realize you need a kind of consistent health industrial complex in the modern age to keep your medical technology growing. And there are dividends. It's not useless. It actually does make it easier to eventually make more targeted niche diseases curable or treatable more and more easily. That's how technology just naturally does it. You get a pioneer, early adopters, initial investors, and then it's basically the bell curve. If you follow the bell curve, it starts and then it phases out as better technologies emerge to do the same thing. And in between is like a roaring success where it's just normal technology. But you do all these things, and you'd be surprised what we could get out of life. You could cut the health budget, but still have more effective healthcare. Because you're not wasting it on managers and paper pushers, and you're targeting the most common, useful things for the least amount of resources, basically, and so on. And the thing about people that want to control the world like a god emperor is they have way too many inefficiencies, and they offload them to other people. That's why it's a problem. When you're dumping all your problems on other people and you never take responsibility for your own competency requirements as someone in charge, and you want to control everything, and making it inevitable that you're going to have inefficiencies and incompetencies in dealing with people's problems when you're in charge, you just can't do it, basically. So yeah, this is my video to Sargon. Basically, it's just the same old, same old. I haven't watched more than 3 minutes and 41 seconds. But this is the total answer. And it's literally trust. It's not the... It's not... It's not pray to Jesus to prevent the bullet from hitting you or prevent the bullet from killing you if someone shoots you. There is a systemic, natural tendency in a very Lao Tzu, do nothing and win, get what you want kind of way. And Lao Tzu wasn't writing that kind of thing for just the general public. He was writing it for governors and ministers and kings and princes and so on. Right? Get off the people's neck, and they will solve their own problems. Basically. And that's what it comes down to. A certain degree of trust in the rest of the world to manifest answers to problems they have and potentially help you out if you got problems too. It's a very... when Jordan Peterson is talking about the Faustian intellect, or the Mephistophelian intellect, or the or whatever, he's talking about the need to directly control everything that exists in the world. It's like an addiction. But the right approach is there's a certain manage your own stuff in your position and do it the right way, and try not to hog all the resources yourself, and everything suddenly starts to work amazingly. Kind of thing, especially for leadership and system creators and so on. So you're working with nature, not against nature. And I mean nature in the sense of the very essence of how the universe works, not just trees and flowers. Nature. So yeah.